The shrill ring of my phone pierced the quiet of our bedroom, startling me awake. I fumbled for it in the dark, my heart racing as I saw Evan's name on the screen. He never called this late. "Evan, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. Silence greeted me, then a muffled sound. Was he crying? "Laura, I can't do this anymore," he finally said, his words slurred. "I've met someone else." The world tilted beneath me. I gripped the phone tighter, willing myself to have misheard. "What are you talking about? Where are you?" "I'm sorry, Laura. I should have told you sooner. I've been seeing her for months." My stomach lurched. "Months? Who is she?" "It doesn't matter. I'm leaving you. I'll be by tomorrow to get my things." The line went dead. I sat there frozen as the reality of what just happened crashed over me in waves. Hours later, I was still sitting on the edge of the bed when sunlight began to filter through the curtains. The chirping of birds outside felt like a cruel joke. How could the world go on as if nothing had changed? A knock at the door jolted me from my daze. I stumbled downstairs, hoping against hope that it was all a bad dream and Evan would be there, ready to apologize for a drunken mistake. Instead, I found Anna on my doorstep, concern etched across her face. "Laura, you look awful. What happened?" I crumpled into her arms, finally letting the tears flow. Between sobs, I managed to choke out, "Evan, he's leaving me. He's been cheating." Anna guided me to the couch, her arm around my shoulders. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. When did you find out?" "Last night. He called. He was drunk, said he'd be here today to get his things." Anna's eyes flashed with anger. "That coward. He didn't even have the decency to tell you face to face." I shook my head, feeling hollow. "I don't understand. We were trying for a baby. Everything seemed fine." "Men," Anna spat. "They can be real bastards sometimes. You deserve so much better, Laura." A car door slammed outside. My heart leapt to my throat as I saw Evan's SUV in the driveway. "I can't face him," I whispered, panic rising. "Anna, please." She squeezed my hand. "I've got this. You go upstairs. I'll deal with him." I retreated to the bedroom, my sanctuary now tainted by last night's phone call. I could hear muffled voices downstairs, Anna's sharp and angry, Evan's low and defensive. Footsteps on the stairs. My breath caught as the door opened, revealing Evan. He looked terrible, unshaven, bloodshot eyes reeking of alcohol. "Laura," he began, his voice rough. "I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." Anger flared within me, burning away the numbness. "Never meant for what to happen, Evan? For me to find out? How long have you been lying to me?" He flinched. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I challenged, rising to face him. "Explain how you could do this to us, to our marriage." Evan's face hardened. "There is no us anymore, Laura. I'm in love with someone else. I'm moving out today." The finality in his voice was like a physical blow. I watched in stunned silence as he began throwing clothes into a suitcase. "What about our plans?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The family we wanted to build?" He paused, not meeting my eyes. "Sometimes things don't work out the way we planned. You'll be better off without me." As he zipped up the suitcase, a wave of desperation washed over me. "Evan, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. Take some time." He shook his head. "It's too late for that. I'm sorry, Laura. I really am." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with the shattered remains of the life we'd built together. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the echoes of broken promises and unanswered questions. Downstairs, I heard the front door close, followed by the roar of Evan's engine fading into the distance. Anna's soft footsteps approached, and I felt her arms wrap around me. "It's going to be okay," she murmured. "You're strong, Laura. You'll get through this." But as I sat there, my world crumbling around me, I wondered how I could possibly pick up the pieces of my shattered heart. The divorce papers lay on the coffee table, a stark reminder of how quickly life can change. I stared at them, my hand shaking as I reached for the pen. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. We were meant to grow old together, raise children, build a life. Now, all those dreams were crumbling before my eyes. A knock at the door startled me. Anna poked her head in, her eyes full of concern. "How are you holding up, sweetie?" I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "I'm fine. Just processing." She sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Laura. It's okay to fall apart sometimes." The dam broke. Tears streamed down my face as I leaned into her embrace. "I don't understand, Anna. Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong?" No, honey, this is all on Evan. He's the one who broke his vows, not you. As if summoned by his name, my phone buzzed with a text from Evan. We need to talk. Can I come over? I showed Anna the message, my stomach churning. She frowned. You don't owe him anything, Laura, but if you want to hear him out, I'll stay with you. Taking a deep breath, I typed a reply. Fine. Be here in an hour. The next 60 minutes crawled by. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say, trying to steel myself against whatever excuses or manipulations Evan might throw my way. When the doorbell rang, my heart leapt into my throat. Anna squeezed my hand before I went to answer it. Evan stood on the porch, looking more put together than the last time I'd seen him. The familiar scent of his cologne hit me, bringing a rush of memories I quickly pushed aside. Laura, he said, his voice soft, thank you for seeing me. I stepped back, letting him in, but maintaining my distance. What do you want, Evan? He glanced at Anna, then back to me. Can we talk privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Anna, I replied, crossing my arms. Evan sighed. Fine. Look, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I made a terrible mistake. I want to come home to work things out. The words I'd longed to hear just days ago now rang hollow. And what about her, the woman you've been seeing? He had the decency to look ashamed. It's over. It was never serious. You're the one I want to be with, Laura. We can start over, maybe even try for that baby we always wanted. I felt the room spin. How dare he dangle our dream in front of me like this? Anna must have sensed my distress because she stepped forward, her voice sharp. That's low, Evan. You can't just waltz back in here and expect everything to be forgiven. Evan's face hardened. This doesn't concern you, Anna. It's between me and my wife. Ex-wife, I corrected, finding my voice. You made your choice, Evan. You don't get to change your mind now that your affair didn't work out. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Laura, I love you. We can get past this. For a moment, I wavered. The thought of reconciliation, of salvaging our marriage was tempting. But then I remembered the pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights wondering what I'd done wrong. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. We can't. I deserve better than this, Evan. Better than you. His face clouded with anger. You'll regret this, Laura. You're not getting any younger. Who else would want you? Anna stepped between us. That's enough. Get out, Evan. Now. As the door slammed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking with sobs. Anna held me, murmuring words of comfort. You did the right thing, Laura. I'm so proud of you. Through my tears, I nodded. It hurt. God, did it hurt, but for the first time since Evan's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild my life without him. As night fell, I sat alone by the window, watching the stars emerge. The divorce papers still lay unsigned on the table, but I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I'd take the first step towards my new future, whatever that might hold. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime a stark contrast to the dread pooling in my stomach. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Claudia, my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, stood on the porch, her lips pressed into a thin line. Laura, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We need to talk. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. As she brushed past me, the scent of her expensive perfume filled the air, bringing back memories of tense family dinners and veiled criticisms. Claudia settled herself on the couch, eyeing the living room with barely concealed disdain. I hear you're going through with this ridiculous divorce. It's not ridiculous, Claudia, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Evan made his choice. She waved her hand dismissively. Men stray, Laura. It's what they do. A good wife learns to look the other way. I felt my cheeks flush with anger. I deserve better than that. I deserve faithfulness and respect. Claudia's eyes narrowed. What you deserve is irrelevant. What matters is family. And you, my dear, have failed spectacularly at that. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I knew what was coming next, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. How long have you and Evan been trying for a baby? She continued, her voice sharp. 5 years, and not so much as a false positive. It's no wonder he looked elsewhere. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. That's not fair. We both wanted children. It wasn't just my... Oh, please, Claudia interrupted. We both know Evan is perfectly capable. The problem lies with you. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. Infertility is complex, Claudia. It's not always about blame. She stood pacing the room like a caged tiger. Blame? Who's talking about blame? I'm talking about responsibility. Your responsibility to this family, to give Evan the children he deserves. The children he deserves, I repeated, incredulous. What about what I deserve? A faithful husband, a supportive family? Claudia whirled on me, her eyes flashing. You ungrateful little... She caught herself, smoothing her expression into one of concern. Laura, dear, I'm only thinking of your best interests. You're not getting any younger. Who else would want you? The echo of Evan's words from the other day sent a chill down my spine. I don't need anyone to want me, Claudia. I want myself. I choose myself. She laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Don't be naive. You'll die alone, surrounded by cats, while Evan moves on and has the family he's always wanted. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now. Claudia blinked, taken aback by my sudden ferocity. Now, Laura. No, I cut her off. I'm done listening to you. I'm done letting you make me feel small and inadequate. Evan's affair is not my fault. Our fertility struggles are not my fault. The only thing I'm guilty of is staying in this toxic situation for far too long. I strode to the front door, throwing it open. Leave, Claudia, and don't come back. For a moment, she stood there, shock written across her face. Then her features hardened. You'll regret this, Laura. When you're all alone, with nothing and no one, you'll wish you'd listened to me. As she stormed out, I slammed the door behind her, my whole body shaking. I leaned against it, sliding down to the floor as sobs racked my body. Minutes or hours later, I couldn't tell. I heard a key in the lock. Anna's worried face appeared as the door opened. Laura, oh honey? She knelt beside me, pulling me into a hug. What happened? Through hiccuping sobs, I recounted Claudia's visit. Anna's face grew stormy as I spoke. That witch, she muttered. Laura, look at me. She tilted my chin up, her eyes fierce. You are strong, you are worthy, and you are not alone. We're going to get through this together, okay? I nodded, clinging to her words like a lifeline. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the living room, I made a silent vow to myself. No more letting others define my worth. It was time to reclaim my life on my own terms. The law office of Jameson & Associates loomed before me, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. I took a deep breath, smoothing my blouse and straightening my shoulders. This was it, the first step towards reclaiming my life. Anna squeezed my hand. You've got this, Laura. I'll be right here when you're done. I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. As I pushed through the revolving doors, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my destiny. Laura Thompson? A smartly dressed woman approached me. I'm Melissa Jameson. Please, come this way. She led me to a sleek conference room, gesturing for me to take a seat. Before we begin, I want you to know that everything you say here is confidential. I'm here to protect your interests, Laura. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Thank you. I'm not sure where to start. Melissa's eyes softened. Why don't you tell me about your marriage? When did things start to go wrong? For the next hour, I poured out my heart. The years of trying for a baby, the growing distance between Evan and me, the devastating revelation of his affair. Melissa listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. Laura, she said finally, her tone serious. Based on what you've told me, I believe we have a strong case for divorce. However, there's something else we need to discuss. My heart raced. What is it? She slid a folder across the table. Our investigators have uncovered some concerning financial activity in your joint accounts. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Page after page of bank statements, transfers to unknown accounts, large withdrawals. My head spun as I tried to make sense of it all. What does this mean? I whispered. Melissa leaned forward. It appears that Evan has been systematically moving money out of your shared accounts for months, possibly years. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, fighting waves of nausea. How much? We're still calculating the total, but it's substantial. Hundreds of thousands, at least. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. But that's impossible. We don't have that kind of money. Melissa's expression was grim. I'm afraid you did, Laura. The question now is, where did it go? As the implications sank in, a cold fury replaced my shock. All those years of scrimping and saving, putting off vacations, delaying home repairs, while Evan was secretly siphoning away our future. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We fight," Melissa said firmly. "We'll file for divorce immediately and petition for a full financial disclosure. If Evan has hidden assets, we'll find them." I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. "Do it. I want everything he took from me." As I left the office, my mind reeled with everything I'd learned. Anna took one look at my face and pulled me into a fierce hug. "What happened in there?" she asked. I pulled back, meeting her concerned gaze. "Evan's been stealing from me, Anna, for years. Everything we worked for, it's gone." Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with anger. "That bastard. Laura, I'm so sorry." I shook my head, a newfound determination coursing through me. "Don't be. This changes everything. I'm not just fighting for my freedom anymore. I'm fighting for justice." As we walked to the car, I felt a shift inside me. The Laura who had walked into that office, scared, uncertain, was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Anna," I said, pausing by the car door, "I need a favor." "Anything," she replied without hesitation. I met her gaze, my voice steady. "I need you to help me pack up the house. I'm not spending another night under the same roof as Evan's lies." Anna's face broke into a fierce grin. "Now that's the Laura I know. Let's go show that cheating thief what you're made of." As we drove away from the law office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in months I felt hope. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade a silent witness to countless battles fought within its walls. Today it would bear witness to mine. I clutched my folder of documents, each page a testament to Evan's betrayal and deceit. Anna squeezed my arm. "You ready for this?" I nodded, steeling myself. "As ready as I'll ever be." We climbed the steps, the click of my heels echoing in the cavernous entrance hall. Melissa, my lawyer, met us at the courtroom door, her face a mask of professional calm. "Laura, remember what we discussed. Stay composed, no matter what Evan or his lawyer might say." I took a deep breath, nodding. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Evan for the first time in months. He sat beside his lawyer, looking polished and confident. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something. Regret? Anger? Before his face hardened into a neutral mask, the judge entered, and we all rose. As the proceedings began, I felt a surreal detachment, as if I were watching someone else's life unravel on a movie screen. Evan's lawyer painted a picture of a troubled marriage, insinuating that my obsession with having a child had driven Evan away. I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself to stay calm as he twisted our years of struggle into a weapon against me. When it was Melissa's turn, she methodically dismantled their arguments, presenting evidence of Evan's infidelity and financial misconduct. I watched Evan's face as bank statements and text messages were entered into evidence, his cool facade cracking under the weight of his exposed lies. "Your Honor," Melissa said, her voice steady, "my client has suffered not only the emotional trauma of her husband's infidelity, but also significant financial harm. We are requesting full disclosure of all assets and a fair division of marital property." Evan's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. My client denies any financial wrongdoing. Mrs. Thompson's claims are baseless and vindictive." The judge peered over his glasses. "Overruled. Mr. Thompson, given the evidence presented, the court orders a full financial audit. You have 30 days to provide a complete accounting of all assets and transactions for the past 5 years." I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me, but my moment of triumph was short-lived. "Your Honor," Evan's lawyer interjected, "in light of these unfounded accusations, my client is amending his petition. We're seeking full ownership of the marital home and a larger share of joint assets to compensate for the damage to Mr. Thompson's reputation." The room spun. Our home, the one we'd lovingly restored together, where I'd imagined raising our children, now another battleground in this war. As the judge called a recess, Evan approached me, his voice low. "Laura, don't do this. We can still work things out. Remember all we've been through together." I met his gaze, searching for any trace of the man I'd once loved. "You're right, Evan. I do remember everything we've been through. That's why I know this is the only way forward." His face darkened. You'll regret this. When you're alone, with nothing, you'll wish you'd listened to reason." As he walked away, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For the first time, I saw Evan clearly, not as the man I'd loved, but as the manipulator he'd become. Outside the courtroom, Anna and Melissa huddled around me. "Laura, are you okay?" Anna asked, her eyes full of concern. I straightened my shoulders, a new resolve burning within me. "I'm more than okay. I'm ready to fight." Melissa nodded approvingly. "That's what I like to hear. But Laura, you should know. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of our home, filled with memories both bitter and sweet. I thought of the years spent trying to build a family, only to have it all crumble beneath me. And I thought of the future. Uncertain, yes, but full of possibilities I'd never dared to imagine before. "I'm prepared," I said, my voice steady. "Whatever it takes, I'm going to reclaim my life. Evan took enough from me. He doesn't get to take my future, too." As we left the courthouse, the sun breaking through the clouds felt like a sign. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The divorce wasn't an end. It was a beginning. My beginning. 2 years after the divorce, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress. The woman staring back at me was almost unrecognizable, confident, radiant, and genuinely happy. I touched the delicate pendant Randy had given me on our 6-month anniversary, a symbol of our new beginning. "You look beautiful, Mom," came a voice from the doorway. I turned to see Lily, Randy's 12-year-old daughter, smiling at me. My heart swelled with love for this child who had accepted me so readily into her life. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Are you ready for the party?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Dad's already downstairs, greeting the first guests." As we descended the stairs, the sound of laughter and conversation filled the air. Our home, a cozy townhouse we'd bought together, was full of friends and family, gathered to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. Randy's face lit up as he saw us. He crossed the room, planting a kiss on my cheek. "There's my beautiful wife," he murmured. For a moment I was overwhelmed by the sheer joy of it all. After the pain and betrayal of my past, I'd found love again, a love built on trust, respect, and genuine partnership. The evening flowed with warmth and laughter. As I moved among our guests, I caught snippets of conversation, friends remarking on how happy Randy and I looked, how well Lily was doing in school, plans for summer vacations and future get-togethers. It was during a lull in the party that I felt it, a sudden wave of nausea that had me gripping the kitchen counter for support. Anna, ever observant, was at my side in an instant. "Laura, are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I nodded, taking deep breaths. "I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. It's probably the champagne." But as the night wore on, the feeling persisted. By the time the last guest had left and we'd finished cleaning up, exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. Randy noticed immediately. "Honey, you look pale. Why don't you go lie down? I'll finish up here." I didn't argue, collapsing onto our bed fully clothed. As I drifted off to sleep, a nagging thought tugged at the edges of my consciousness, but I was too tired to grasp it. The next morning, I woke to find Randy already up, Lily's laughter drifting up from the kitchen. As I sat up, that same wave of nausea hit me. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. With trembling hands, I counted back the days since my last period. How had I not noticed? We'd been so careful, knowing the heartbreak I'd experienced before. I crept to the bathroom, thankful for the pregnancy test I'd kept hidden away, a remnant of my past life with Evan. The 3 minutes it took for the results felt like an eternity. When I finally looked down at the stick, my world tilted on its axis. 2 pink lines stared back at me, unmistakable and life-changing. Pregnant. After years of trying, of heartbreak and loss with Evan, here I was, expecting a child with Randy. Joy and terror warred within me. What if something went wrong? What if I couldn't carry to term? And how would Lily feel about a new sibling? I sank to the bathroom floor, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this moment. Memories of my past struggles flooded back. The disappointment each month, the failed treatments, the way Evan had eventually blamed me for our inability to conceive. But this was different. I was different. Randy was different. A soft knock on the door startled me. "Laura?" Randy's voice was tinged with worry. "Are you okay in there?" I looked at the test in my hand, then at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had weathered storms and come out stronger. She had found love again, built a new family, and now stood on the precipice of a dream she'd thought lost forever. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Randy's concerned face came into view, and I felt a surge of love so strong it nearly knocked me off my feet. "Randy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I have something to tell you." The doctor's office was eerily quiet as Randy and I sat hand in hand, waiting for the results of my latest ultrasound. At 20 weeks pregnant, every appointment felt like walking a tightrope between hope and fear. "Laura Thompson?" a nurse called, and we both stood, hearts racing. Dr. Patel greeted us with a warm smile, but I could sense an undercurrent of tension. "Laura, Randy, please have a seat." I gripped Randy's hand tighter as Dr. Patel pulled up the ultrasound images on her computer screen. "As you can see," she began, pointing to a grainy black and white image, "the baby's development is progressing well in most areas. However, I'm concerned about the size of the fetus. It's measuring smaller than we'd expect at this stage." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Patel's expression softened. "It could be nothing to worry about. Some babies are simply smaller. But given your history of fertility issues, I'd like to run some additional tests to rule out any complications." Randy squeezed my hand. "What kind of tests?" "An amniocentesis would give us the most comprehensive information," Dr. Patel explained. "But I want to be clear. There are risks involved." As she detailed the procedure and its potential complications, I felt as if I were underwater, her words muffled and distant. All I could think about was the tiny life growing inside me, the miracle I'd waited so long for, now potentially at risk. "Laura," Randy's voice broke through my haze. "What do you think?" I looked from him to Dr. Patel, then down at my slightly rounded belly. I need to think about it." The drive home was silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Lily peering out the window, waving excitedly. The sight of her brought fresh tears to my eyes. Inside, our babysitter quickly picked up on the tension. "Is everything okay?" she asked as she gathered her things. Randy forced a smile. "Just a long day. Thanks for watching, Lily." As soon as the door closed behind her, Lily bounded up to us. "How's the baby? Did you get new pictures?" I felt my throat constrict. "The baby's fine, sweetheart. Why don't you go start your homework? We'll talk more at dinner." Once Lily was upstairs, I collapsed onto the couch, the weight of the day finally crashing down on me. Randy sat beside me, pulling me close. "Talk to me, Laura," he murmured. "What are you thinking?" I took a shuddering breath. "I'm terrified, Randy. What if something's wrong? What if I lose this baby too?" He held me tighter. "We don't know that anything's wrong, and whatever happens, we'll face it together." But as the days passed, the fear grew. Every twinge, every moment I didn't feel the baby move sent me into a spiral of panic. I found myself withdrawing, spending hours researching every possible complication, torturing myself with worst-case scenarios. A week after the appointment, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the amniocentesis consent forms. The risks swam before my eyes: miscarriage, infection, preterm labor. How could I make this decision? The sound of the front door opening startled me. Lily burst in, followed by Randy. "Mom, Dad says we can order pizza tonight. Can we get extra cheese?" Lily's excitement was palpable. I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "Sure, sweetie, whatever you want." Randy's brow furrowed as he took in the scene, the scattered papers, my red-rimmed eyes. "Lily, why don't you go decide on a movie for us to watch later?" Once she was out of earshot, Randy knelt beside me. "Laura, this can't go on. You're making yourself sick with worry." I couldn't meet his eyes. "I can't help it. Every time I close my eyes, I see all the ways this could go wrong. I don't know if I can survive losing another baby." Randy cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. "Listen to me. You are the strongest person I know. Whatever happens, we will get through it. But you have to let me in. Let me help you carry this burden." As I looked into his eyes, so full of love and concern, something inside me broke. The walls I'd been building crumbled, and I collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "I'm so scared," I whispered. "I know," he murmured, stroking my hair. "I am too, but we're in this together. You, me, Lily, and this baby. We're a family." In that moment, surrounded by Randy's love and the sounds of Lily humming upstairs, I made my decision. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them head on. For my family, all of them. The hospital waiting room buzzed with nervous energy as I sat, one hand on my swollen belly, the other clutching Randy's. At 36 weeks pregnant, we were here for what should have been a routine checkup, but nothing about this pregnancy had been routine. Laura Thompson? A nurse called, and we stood following her to the examination room. Dr. Patel entered, her face serious. Laura, Randy, I'm afraid we've detected some irregularities in the baby's heartbeat. We need to perform an emergency C-section. The world tilted beneath me. But it's too early, I whispered, panic rising. We don't have a choice, Dr. Patel said gently. The baby is in distress. Everything after that was a blur of activity. As they prepped me for surgery, I clung to Randy's hand, terror and hope warring within me. Just before they wheeled me into the operating room, a commotion erupted in the hallway. To my shock, I saw Claudia pushing past nurses. Evan close behind. Laura, Claudia cried, her face a mask of concern I'd never seen before. We just heard. You can't do this. Evan stepped forward, his eyes pleading. Laura, please, come home with us. We can take care of you and the baby. This is meant to be our second chance. For a moment, I was transported back to our old life, the years of trying, the heartbreak, the blame. But then I felt Randy's steady presence beside me, heard Lily's voice in my head calling me Mom. I took a deep breath, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. Claudia, Evan, I appreciate your concern, but this is my family now. My home, my life. Claudia's face hardened. You ungrateful girl, after everything we've done for you. That's enough, Randy interrupted, his voice firm. Laura needs to get to surgery. Please leave. As security escorted them out, I saw a flicker of something, regret, acceptance, cross Evan's face. But I had no time to dwell on it as they wheeled me away. The operating room was a flurry of activity. Through my fear, I focused on Randy's voice, steady and reassuring. You've got this, Laura. You're the strongest person I know. And then suddenly, a cry pierced the air. Strong, defiant, alive. Our baby. It's a girl, Dr. Patel announced, her voice thick with emotion. She's small, but she's fighting. Tears streamed down my face as they placed her on my chest, this tiny, perfect being we'd fought so hard for. As I looked into her eyes, I saw not just our future, but my past. Every struggle, every heartbreak that had led me to this moment. In the recovery room, surrounded by Randy, Lily, and our new daughter, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. Anna burst in, her face glowing with joy as she took in the scene. Oh, Laura, she breathed. She's beautiful. What's her name? Randy and I exchanged a look. We'd discussed names, but nothing had felt right until this moment. Hope, I said softly. Her name is Hope. As if recognizing her name, Hope opened her eyes, her tiny hand wrapping around my finger. In that gesture, I felt the weight of my journey. The pain of betrayal, the struggle to rebuild, the fear and joy of this pregnancy. But I also felt the strength I'd gained, the love I'd found, the family I'd built. A knock at the door drew our attention. To my surprise, I saw Claudia standing there alone this time. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual poise gone. May I come in? She asked hesitantly. I looked at Randy, who nodded slightly. Of course, I said. Claudia approached the bed, her gaze fixed on Hope. She's perfect, she whispered. Then, to my shock, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Laura, for everything. I was wrong about you, about all of this. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I thought of all the pain, all the cruel words, but as I looked at Hope, at Randy and Lily, I felt the last of my bitterness melt away. Thank you, Claudia, I said softly. Would you like to hold your granddaughter? As Claudia cradled Hope, her face transformed by wonder, I felt the final pieces of my life click into place. This was my family, not defined by blood or past mistakes, but by love, forgiveness, and hope. In that moment, surrounded by the people I loved, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. My journey had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to a love deeper than I'd ever imagined and a strength I never knew I possessed. As Hope's tiny hand wrapped around my finger once more, I smiled. This was just the beginning of our story. You're dead to me, Tara. This is my house now. Candace's icy words cut through me as she towered over my crumpled form, blood trickling from the gash on my head where she had smashed the crystal vase. It had all started so innocently when Derek and I got married 5 years ago. We were hopelessly in love, and I couldn't have been happier starting our life together. But Candace made it her twisted mission to drive a wedge between us from day one. "She's just jealous because you're so young and beautiful," Derek would say, brushing off his older sister's constant put-downs and snide remarks. I should have taken it as a warning sign of the hell to come. At first, it was little digs about my cooking or how I kept the house. Then it escalated to her dropping not-so-subtle hints that I didn't deserve Derek or his money. The more I tried to make peace, the nastier she became. "You're just a gold digger looking for a free ride," she spat during one of her rages when Derek wasn't around. "My brother is too good for you." Derek refused to see Candace's true colors no matter how much evidence I showed him of her manipulation. She was his precious big sister who could do no wrong in his eyes. I don't know if it was guilt over being the favorite child or just pure brainwashing, but he always took her side. Things came to a head when I discovered bank statements showing Candace had been slowly siphoning money from their inheritance after their parents died. I finally had proof of her conniving ways, but Derek just blew up at me for prying into family matters. "How dare you accuse my sister of something like that?" he shouted, his face turning beet red. "You're the one with the problem, always looking for reasons to hate her." That's when Candace struck, seizing her chance to play the innocent victim while I was the scorned villain. The vase came out of nowhere, caving the side of my skull before I could react. As I crumpled to the floor, her shadow loomed over me with those chilling parting words. I lay there in a daze, struggling to stay conscious while Candace ranted and raved about how she would finally get what she deserved. My life with Derek. The love of my life just stood there like a coward, unable to lift a finger against his twisted sister. That's when I knew my marriage was beyond saving. But I'll be damned if I'd let that psychopath take everything I had while getting away with it. I should have seen the signs earlier, but I was too blinded by love and Candace's mastery of manipulation. Derek's older sister had been scheming to turn him against me from the moment we got married. "Oh, Tara, this pot roast is a bit dry, don't you think?" Candace would say with a saccharine smile during one of her weekly dinner visits. "You really need to keep an eye on things in the kitchen." Derek would just chuckle and wave it off. "Candace is just teasing. It's fine, honey." But it was a pattern. She'd mock my homemaking skills, my appearance, how I spent money, anything to undermine me and make me seem inadequate as Derek's wife, and he ate it up, his sister's poisonous words slowly turning his adoring gaze into one of doubt and disdain. "Don't you think that dress is a bit revealing?" he started saying when we went out. "My sister's right. You could stand to be a little more modest." The emotional abuse only escalated as the years rolled by. Candace would sweep in like a tornado, leaving chaos and misery in her wake with every visit. Derek increasingly took her side, berating me for being oversensitive whenever I called out her cruelty. "She's my sister, Tara. Blood," he'd rage, his 6'3" frame towering over me. "You need to learn to accept her." Meanwhile, Candace played the victim, batting her eyes innocently whenever I confronted her. "I'm just trying to help, that's all. You're always so defensive for no reason." I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in with no escape. My adoring husband had become Candace's enabler, allowing her to treat me like dirt in my own home. I knew I had to find proof of her true sinister nature before it was too late. That proof came when I discovered bank statements showing Candace had been slowly siphoning money from the inheritance she shared with Derek after their parents died. I couldn't believe my eyes. This went far beyond her usual mind games. She was outright stealing from her own brother. "Look at this." I desperately showed the statements to Derek. "Your precious sister has been robbing you blind." His face turned beet red with rage, but not at the betrayal I'd uncovered. "How dare you go snooping through my private financial records? What gives you the right?" "Are you serious?" I cried out, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. "She's been taking your money for years and you're attacking me?" That's when Candace played her most brilliant card, rushing into the room with crocodile tears glistening in her eyes. "Derek, I had no choice," she blubbered, pulling him into an embrace. "The medical bills from Mom's cancer treatments, the nursing home fees for Dad, I've been drowning in debt from taking care of them. I didn't want to worry you." Hook, line and sinker. Just like that, the vile leech had turned the tables, positioning herself as the martyr making sacrifices for family. Derek pulled away from my grasp, disgust etched on his face. See what you've done, Tara. How could you put my sister through this after everything she's done for us? I opened my mouth, but no words came. Candace just smirked at me, having won yet another twisted victory. In that moment, I realized I was truly alone in this nightmare, and that gave me a reckless determination to bring my tormentor down, no matter what it took. The tension in the house was thicker than fog after Candace's latest manipulative stunt. Derek could barely look me in the eye, still seething over my betrayal of digging into his finances and calling out his precious sister's lies. How could you do this to me, Tara? He seethed over the dinner table, pushing his plate away. Accusing Candace of stealing from her own family? She sacrificed everything for us. I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised his hand to silence me. Don't. I don't want to hear another word against her. My sister is the only one I can really trust. The message was clear. I was the enemy now for daring to disrupt Candace's crocodile tear narrative about being buried in debt from taking care of their parents. Derek had fully drunk her Kool-Aid. I should have known then that there was no saving my marriage, but some deluded part of me still clung to hope. I decided to make one last effort to get through to Derek and expose his sister's depravity. A few nights later, Candace swept in for another of her family dinner visits, primped and preening in a gaudy low-cut top that seemed designed to taunt me. Derek and I could barely get 2 words out before she was running her mouth as usual. Well, if it isn't the little wife trying so hard to keep up appearances, she sneered as I set the table. That shirt looks a bit tight, doesn't it, dear? Trying to catch someone's eye besides my brother's? I felt my face burn with humiliation, but I refused to take her bait this time. Hello, Candace. Lovely to see you too. She arched an overplucked eyebrow at my calm tone. What, no snide remarks today? Don't tell me you finally learned some class. That's enough, Candace. Derek barked, finally growing a spine. Leave her alone? I felt a rush of gratitude. He was finally defending me. But Candace just tutted and shook her head slowly. Derek, you're too blind to see what a disrespectful, ungrateful shrew she is. Always mouthing off. No wonder you can't control her. If I were you, I would have put that little tramp in her place a long time ago. That's when hell broke loose. You self-righteous bitch! I exploded, sending a glass of wine crashing to the floor. I should have known you'd never let up with your vicious, toxic behavior. Candace recoiled in mock horror. Why, I never, Derek! Derek, did you hear what she just called me? Derek's face was thunderous. You watch your mouth, Tara. That's my sister you're talking to. I rounded on him, years of anger and resentment boiling over. Are you kidding me right now? She's the one who came in here slinging insults from the second she walked through that door. Why are you making excuses for her? Because she's my family, he roared, spit flying from his mouth. Blood is thicker than water, in case you've forgotten. Oh yes, let's talk about family, I shot back, seeing red. Like how she's been stealing money from your inheritance for years? Or did you just conveniently forget about those bank statements I showed you? Candace gasped, putting a delicate hand to her chest. Derek, you didn't tell me she was still going on about that ridiculous accusation. How dare you keep dredging up lies about me? Derek looked like he'd been slapped, the vein in his neck bulging. He stepped towards me, fists clenched, and for a terrifying moment I thought he was going to strike me. Get out, he said in a low, trembling voice. Get out of my house right now before I do something I'll regret. I stared at him in disbelief as Candace smirked behind his back. This was really it. My marriage was over, and she had won. But I didn't leave. Not yet. You want me out so bad, I shouted, feeling reckless. Fine, I'm gone, but not before everyone knows what a psychopathic, money-grubbing snake your sister really is. I stormed out of the house that night, tears of rage and despair stinging my eyes. Derek had made his choice loud and clear. His poisonous sister would always come before me, no matter how much hell she put me through. Where could I even go? I had given up my career, my friends, my entire life to be Derek's wife. Now I was out on the street with nothing, all because I dared to defy his deranged beloved Candace. There was only one person I could turn to, my best friend Jill. I broke down sobbing when she opened her door, unleashing the torrent of emotions I had been bottling up for years. "That evil bitch has ruined everything," I wailed as Jill ushered me inside. "Derek is so brainwashed, he'll never see her for the manipulative monster she truly is." Jill wrapped me in a tight hug, letting me cry it all out. When I finally regained my composure, she looked me square in the eye with grim determination. "Enough is enough, Tara. You can't let Candace just walk all over you like this. It's time to fight back." I shook my head despondently. "Against her? You don't know the half of what I've been through. She's got Derek so wrapped around her finger, he'll never believe a word I say about her true nature." "Then we need evidence," Jill stated firmly. "Proof that she's the conniving psychopath you say she is. Once we have that, we can bring her down for good." An ember of hope flickered in my chest. The bank statements showing her stealing from their inheritance. Those were just the tip of the iceberg. There has to be more we can find to expose her. Jill nodded grimly. "We start digging first thing tomorrow morning. I'm not letting my best friend's life be destroyed by this witch." Over the next few days, Jill and I formed a plan to infiltrate Derek's home and gather any information that could take Candace down for good. With her working as a realtor, it was easy for Jill to make a copy of the house keys and scope out when Derek was at work. "Keep your eyes peeled for anything suspicious," she instructed as we slipped into the house. "Emails, letters, documents, it all could be the key to exposing her." I rifled through Derek's office with trembling hands, my heart pounding. If Candace found out what we were doing, I shuddered to think of the consequences. But then a hidden file caught my eye, bank statements and legal documents from several years ago. As I flipped through the pages, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Jill, you need to see this," I said in a shaky voice. The documents confirmed my worst fears. Candace had been under investigation for allegedly attempting to murder her own husband several years earlier. There were transcripts of witnesses claiming she had been siphoning money from his accounts and trying to pressure him into changing his will. Then he had died suddenly in a suspicious car accident, with the police unable to prove foul play. Candace had inherited everything, and the case had gone cold. "Oh my God," Jill whispered, hand over her mouth. "Are you telling me this psycho actually killed her husband for his money?" I nodded slowly, feeling numb. "And she's been doing the exact same thing to Derek this whole time. That's why she was so hell-bent on turning him against me. I was the one obstacle keeping her from my husband's inheritance." Jill's eyes hardened to steel. "We have everything we need now. It's time to make that evil bitch pay for what she's done, once and for all." I felt a dark sense of resolve overtake me, pushing away the fear and doubt. Candace's reign of terror was finally going to come crashing down around her. And this time, there would be no more playing the victim. The evidence of Candace's murderous past stunned me into silence. This went far beyond her usual mind games and manipulation. She was an outright psychopath who had likely killed for money before. "We need to take this to the police right away," Jill stated, her face pale. "Who knows what that nutjob is capable of if she's gotten away with murder once already?" I nodded numbly, still reeling from the bombshell revelation. Part of me had always suspected Candace was unhinged, but proof that she was an actual killer took things to a whole new level of depravity. "You don't understand," I said hollowly. "Derek will never believe any of this, no matter what we show him. He's too deep under her spell." Jill set her jaw grimly. "Then we make sure she goes away for good, with or without his cooperation. This has gone far enough. It's time that psycho faced some real consequences." Over the next few days, we pored over the files, building an airtight case to present to the authorities. Bank statements, witness testimonies, even phone records indicating Candace's husband had been trying to escape her control in the months before his accident. It was all finally adding up to the truth. The thing that chilled me to the bone the most were the photos from the crime scene. A crumpled car in a ditch, the body extricated and zipped into a black bag on the roadside. I had to look away, feeling sick at the realization that Candace was likely responsible for such a grisly end just to inherit her husband's wealth. "You know she's going to try the same thing with Derek once I'm out of the picture," I told Jill, my voice shaking. "First, it was his inheritance from your parents, And now she wants everything. The house, the cars, the whole lifestyle I built with him. She'll stop at nothing. Jill gave me a determined look. Not if we stop her first. We've got everything we need to put this monster away for the rest of her life, where she can't hurt anyone else. The next day, we took the file to the police precinct and requested to meet with a detective. I could barely speak as I handed over the evidence, recounting Candace's escalating campaign of abuse and violence against me. The grizzled cop flipped through the documents, his eyes widening. "You're telling me this woman got away with murdering her husband for his money years ago? And now she's trying to do the same thing to her own brother?" I nodded miserably. "Derek is under her total control. She's completely brainwashed him into taking her side over me, no matter what horrible things she does. If you don't stop her reign of terror, I'm afraid of what she's capable of." The detective's jaw tightened grimly. "Don't you worry, ma'am. We've got more than enough here to lock this Candace up and throw away the key. Trying to kill her own flesh and blood for inheritance money? That's a new low, even for my line of work." He paused, seeming to study me closely. "I've got to ask, how'd you manage to get all this evidence on her? This is one hell of a case file you've put together." I felt a rush of adrenaline as the weight of everything came crashing down. This was it, the beginning of the end for Candace's twisted reign. No more games, no more manipulation or fake tears. Just cold, hard consequences for her unforgivable actions. "Let's just say I've had a lot of practice seeing through that snake's lies," I replied tightly. "It's time she finally paid for what she's done to my family." As they led me out, I could have sworn I saw the cop giving me the faintest of nods, a look of respect on his weathered face. In that moment, I realized I had been underestimated as a mere victim for far too long. Now the merciless former predator was about to become the prey, and this time I would be the one showing no mercy. I should have known Candace wouldn't go down without one final vicious fight. The day after Jill and I took our damning evidence to the police, the demon herself was waiting when I returned to my friend's apartment. Well, if it isn't the ungrateful little schemer," she sneered as I froze in the doorway. Candace rose from the couch, hands on her hips and eyes glittering with malice. "I knew you were plotting something behind my back." My heart pounded, but I refused to show fear. "Get out of here, Candace. It's over. The police know everything about what you did." Rather than looking scared, she threw back her head and laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made my blood run cold. "You stupid girl. Did you really think a few measly documents would be enough to take me down? I'm afraid you've severely underestimated me." Before I could react, Candace lunged forward and grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the end table, raising it high above her head. "This is for sticking your nose where it didn't belong." The vase came crashing down with sickening force, exploding against the back of my skull in a blossom of blinding pain and darkness. I collapsed to the floor in a boneless heap, warm blood gushing from the gash as Candace towered over me. "You're dead, you hear me?" she snarled, spittle flying from her twisted mouth. "This is my house now, my life. I'll make Derek see that you're nothing but a lying, vindictive snake." I struggled to speak, to move, but unconsciousness was rapidly overtaking me. The last thing I saw was Derek himself appearing in the doorway, his expression one of shock and horror. "Candace? What have you done?" Then everything faded to black. I drifted in and out of awareness, snatches of voices and movement all around me. At one point, I could have sworn I heard the wail of sirens in the distance. When I finally came to, I was in a hospital bed, Jill sitting vigil beside me with a haunted look on her face. My head throbbed with white-hot agony, and I could feel the thick bandages wrapped around my skull. "Oh, Tara, thank God," Jill whispered, grabbing my hand. "I thought I was going to lose you there for a while." Flashes of memory came flooding back. Candace's twisted sneer, the vase, the blinding pain and blood. I tried to sit up but immediately regretted it, crying out. "That psychotic bitch, she really did try to kill me," I rasped, my voice a dry croak. "Where is she? Did they arrest her?" Jill looked away guiltily. "The police took her into custody after I called 911. But, Tara, you're not going to believe this. Derek refused to press charges against her. He says it was just a misunderstanding and that you two fought over him." White-hot rage flooded my system, adrenaline temporarily overriding the pain. I ripped the IV from my arm and tried to swing my legs over the side of the bed. That sniveling coward. After everything she did, he's still defending her? I seethed through gritted teeth. I can't believe this. Jill put a hand on my shoulder, gently restraining me. Tara, please, you're in no condition to go storming off right now. Just take a breath, okay? I wanted to rage and scream, but the stark reality was sinking in. My husband was so twisted by Candace's manipulation that he would literally let her try to kill me and still make excuses for her depravity. Our marriage was broken beyond repair. You're right, I said, sinking back against the pillows in defeat. It's over. Derek is too far gone. He'll never see that evil bitch for what she really is. But even as I spoke the words, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Because in that moment, I realized my battle was no longer with Derek at all. It was with the venomous snake, Candace herself. And this time I would stop at nothing to make sure she faced the consequences she deserved. No more games, no more crying or pleading for my husband to see reason. It was time to go for the jugular, before his deranged sister destroyed anyone else's life like she almost did mine. I turned to Jill, my eyes hardening with resolve. We need to get out of here. I have a plan to put Candace away for good, where she can never hurt another soul. Are you with me? Jill didn't hesitate, giving a grim nod of determination. You know I am. Let's make that psycho finally pay for her crimes once and for all. The hospital room was eerily silent as Derek stepped through the door, his expression unreadable. I tensed instinctively, my hand tightening around Jill's in a silent plea for support. What are you doing here? I asked flatly, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. Come to make more excuses for your deranged sister? Derek flinched slightly at my tone, but didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sank into it heavily, running a hand over his face. Tara, I don't even know where to begin, he said quietly. What Candace did was unforgivable. Trying to kill you like that in cold blood? He trailed off, shaking his head slowly. Despite the gravity of his words, I felt no satisfaction or relief, only a weary sense of resignation and simmering anger. Save your breath, I cut him off coldly. Your sister is a psychopathic murderer, and you knew it on some level this entire time. You just chose to ignore the ugly truth about her because she was your precious blood relative. Derek opened his mouth to protest, but I barreled on, years of resentment bubbling over. Don't even try to deny it. I showed you all the evidence of her stealing from your inheritance, trying to manipulate you into cutting me out. I had those files proving she killed her own husband for his money. But you just couldn't be bothered to see what was right in front of your face. You're right. The admission was so soft, I almost missed it. Derek's shoulders slumped in defeat. You're absolutely right, Tara. I've been so deep in denial about Candace's true nature that I let her take over my life. I let her abuse you, manipulate me, and turn me against my own wife. He looked up at me then, his eyes haunted. I will regret that for the rest of my days. You didn't deserve any of the hell she put you through. I was just too blind and weak to stand up to her twisted mind games. White-hot anger flared in my chest, and I struggled to keep my voice even. So what? I'm just supposed to forgive and forget now? Let you off the hook because you've suddenly realized what a monster your sister is? No. Derek shook his head slowly. No, I don't deserve forgiveness or another chance. Not after what I allowed to happen under my own roof. I came here to tell you that it's over between us. The words hit me like a physical blow, despite the fact that I'd already accepted our marriage was broken beyond repair. I think some delusional part of me still clung to the hope that Derek would make things right once Candace's evil was exposed. I'm filing for divorce immediately, he continued, unable to meet my eyes, and I'm not going to contest you for anything. The house, the assets, it's all yours. Candace's poisonous influence cost me the best thing I ever had. This is the least I can do. I opened my mouth, but no words would come. Part of me wanted to rage, to hurl vicious recriminations at this pathetic shadow of the man I once loved. But the bigger part of me felt utterly hollow, devoid of any satisfaction or closure from his surrender. Jill spoke up, her voice laced with contempt. So that's it then? You just slink away with your tail between your legs while your demented sister rots in jail? Typical. I wish there was more I could do or say, Derek said heavily. But we both know there's no coming back from the unforgivable things I allowed to happen. You deserve so much better, Tara. With that, he slowly rose and turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at me one final time. For what it's worth, I am sorry, truly sorry, for everything. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our life together. As the tears came, I felt Jill's arms wrap around me in a fierce embrace, letting me finally release the tidal wave of anger, pain, and heartbreak I had been bottling up for so long. My marriage was over. My husband lost to Candace's toxic influence. But in that moment of mourning, I found a strange sense of freedom and determination taking root. Because if Derek was too weak to stand up to his twisted sister, I would be strong enough for the both of us. Candace's evil reign of terror was finally going to end, one way or another. In the days after Derek walked out of my life for good, I found myself at a crossroads. One path led to wallowing in the ashes of my failed marriage, letting the trauma and betrayal consume me. The other, that path burned with an icy determination to make things right. We can't let Candace just walk away from this, I told Jill, my voice hardening. She tried to kill me, Jill, her own sister-in-law. That kind of depravity can't go unanswered. Jill nodded grimly. You're right. For too long, that psycho has been able to slither away from the consequences she deserves. It's time we make sure the law catches up to her once and for all. With renewed purpose, we began compiling every shred of evidence we had on Candace. The financial documents, witness statements, everything. A comprehensive paper trail of her decades-long spree of greed, manipulation, and likely murder. This should be enough to bury that snake for the rest of her miserable life, Jill said, eyeing the thick file with grim satisfaction. No more getting off easy with her crocodile tears. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my heart pounding. This was it. The first steps towards ensuring Candace could never hurt another innocent person like she almost did to me. I was finally taking my power back from her toxic reign of abuse. We took the files straight to the police precinct downtown and requested to meet with a detective. A grizzled veteran in a rumpled suit eventually came to usher us into an interview room, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the damning evidence. You're telling me this Candace woman has been grifting and manipulating her own family for years? He said slowly. Possibly even killed her first husband to inherit his money? I nodded, holding his gaze steadily. That's correct, detective. And her latest stunt was trying to murder me, her own sister-in-law, by bashing my skull in. She's an irredeemable psychopath who will stop at nothing to get what she wants. The cop's jaw tightened as he studied the crime scene photos, the vivid evidence of Candace's brutal attack. I've seen a lot of low-life scumbags in my day, but this is a new level of depraved. He closed the file and fixed me with an intense look. Miss Jennings, I want you to know we're taking this case extremely seriously. With the mountain of proof you've brought us, we're confident we can lock this woman away for a very long time before she has a chance to hurt anyone else. A weight lifted off my shoulders, and I suddenly felt lightheaded with relief. After years of being gaslit and tormented, I was finally being heard and believed about Candace's unforgivable cruelty. Thank you, Detective, I said, my voice wavering slightly. You have no idea how much it means to know the law won't let her evil go unanswered this time. The cop offered a grim smile. No thanks needed, ma'am. We're just doing our job to get a dangerous predator off the streets. You're the one who showed real courage by standing up to this Candace's abuse and not backing down. As Jill and I left the precinct, I felt a sense of peace and resolution wash over me, despite the storm clouds ahead. Candace's reign of terror was finally going to be brought to justice, no matter how much she cried or played the victim card. And in that moment, I realized my own bitter struggle had given me strength I never knew I possessed. The once meek, tormented wife was no more. I was a survivor who had risen from the ashes of Candace's twisted games to fight another day. And this time I would be the one who emerged victorious, while she got to experience the cold, hard consequences she so richly deserved. The dinner table was set with Mom's finest china, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. The smell of roasted chicken wafted through the air, making my mouth water. It should have been a pleasant family gathering, but the tension was palpable. "Dee, dear, you really should have made more of an effort with your appearance," Mom said, eyeing my casual outfit with disdain. "This is a special night." I forced a smile, ignoring the jab. "It smells delicious, Mom. Thank you for hosting us." Tom squeezed my hand under the table, his way of offering silent support. At least he was on my side, or so I thought. As we started eating, Mom launched into a monologue about the importance of family legacy and carrying on the family name. Her pointed glances in my direction made the subtext clear. My inability to have children was a constant source of disappointment. "Which is why," she continued, "we've been discussing some exciting changes for our family's future." Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat and a knot formed in my stomach. This didn't sound good. "You see, Dee," Mom said, her voice sickly sweet, "while we love you dearly, the fact remains that you're unable to provide an heir. A great injustice, really, given how devoted Tom has been." I felt Tom tense beside me, but he remained silent. Anger and hurt bubbled up inside me as Mom's words sank in. "So, we've decided to welcome a new addition to the family, a younger, more fertile woman who can give us the grandchildren we so desperately desire." The room spun as I processed her words. A new wife for Tom? How could he betray me like this? "You can't be serious," I managed, my voice shaking. "Tom, tell her she's out of her mind." But Tom wouldn't meet my gaze, his eyes fixed on his plate. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. He was in on this twisted plan. "Don't look so shocked, dear," Mom said, her smile never wavering. "This was always the arrangement. You knew your role was temporary." Memories of our early days together flooded my mind. The promises of forever, the dreams we'd shared. All lies, it seemed. "How could you do this to me?" I asked Tom, fighting back tears. "After everything we've been through." He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "I'm sorry, Dee, but my mother is right. We need an heir. It's for the good of the family." The betrayal cut deep, a knife twisting in my gut. In that moment, I saw my husband and mother-in-law for who they truly were: manipulative, selfish people who viewed me as disposable. As the shock gave way to anger, I made a decision. I would not go quietly. If they wanted a war, I would give them one they'd never forget. Pushing back from the table, I met Mom's cold stare with newfound resolve. "You haven't seen the last of me," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving my shattered dreams behind. But a new fire burned within me, a determination to fight for what was rightfully mine. They wanted an heir? Well, they were about to get more than they bargained for. A few days after the disastrous dinner, Mom called to invite me over for a casual gathering with some of the community women. I knew it was a trap, but I also saw an opportunity to start fighting back. As I walked into her immaculate living room, I was immediately surrounded by a group of well-dressed, gossiping ladies. Mom beamed at the center of it all, like a spider overseeing her web. "Ladies, you all know my dear daughter-in-law, Dee," she announced, gesturing for me to join her. "Come, let me properly introduce you." One by one, she paraded me in front of the women, each introduction laced with subtle digs about my age, my childlessness, my perceived inadequacies as a wife. The words stung, but I kept my composure, forcing a polite smile. "This is Marjorie, president of the gardening club. Isn't it a shame Dee has never shown an interest in cultivating life?" Mom said, with a pointed look. Marjorie gave me a pitying glance before turning away, whispering to her friend. It went on like that for what felt like an eternity, Mom's barbs growing sharper with each new acquaintance. Through it all, Tom lounged in the corner, nursing a drink and pointedly ignoring the spectacle. As the gathering wore on, I noticed a few of the women stealing sympathetic glances my way. Perhaps I had more allies than I realized. During a lull, I found myself beside Judith, an older woman known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue. "Don't pay her any mind, dear," she murmured, patting my arm. "We all know Lorraine's just bitter because her own daughter abandoned her years ago." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this juicy bit of information. Judith gave me a conspiratorial wink before moving on. Suddenly, the endless parade of introductions took on a new light. These women weren't just Mom's adoring sycophants. They were a wealth of knowledge about her deepest insecurities and darkest secrets. and with a few well-placed allies, I could start turning the tide. As the gathering finally wound down, I made a point of thanking Mom for her hospitality with a pointed smile. She narrowed her eyes, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "This isn't over, Dolores," she hissed under her breath. "Not by a long shot." "Wouldn't have it any other way," I replied coolly, already formulating my next move. On my way out, I caught Tom's eye for the briefest moment. His gaze was hollow, empty, as if he'd already checked out of our marriage long ago. Fine by me. The less he was involved, the easier it would be to dismantle his mother's twisted schemes from the inside out. As I drove away from Mom's house, I felt a newfound sense of determination. She might have won the battle, but the war was just beginning. With a few unexpected allies in my corner, I was ready to fight for my life and make her regret ever crossing me. A few days after the disastrous community gathering, Lorraine ambushed me with another cruel demand. "We need to schedule you for a fertility test," she announced over coffee, not even looking up from her magazine. I nearly choked on my drink. "Excuse me? Why on earth would I do that?" She fixed me with a steely gaze. "To prove once and for all whether you're capable of providing an heir. If the results are positive, perhaps we can revisit this ridiculous notion of bringing in another woman." The audacity of her request stunned me into silence. After everything they'd put me through, they still expected me to jump through hoops? I opened my mouth to protest, but Tom cut me off. "Just do it, Dee," he said flatly. "The sooner we get this settled, the better for everyone." His callous disregard for my feelings felt like a slap in the face. Didn't my husband have any loyalty left? Realizing I was outnumbered, I agreed to the test, if only to buy myself some time. The procedure itself was mercifully quick, but the waiting was agonizing. Each day that ticked by, I imagined Lorraine growing more smug, more convinced that I would fail this latest trial. I couldn't let her win, not this time. Finally, the call came. The doctor's tone was carefully neutral as she relayed the results. I was still fertile, very much capable of conceiving a child. An immense weight lifted from my shoulders, and for a fleeting moment I felt a glimmer of hope that this nightmare might actually end. That hope was swiftly extinguished when I shared the news with Lorraine and Tom. Rather than being pleased, or even relieved, Lorraine's expression remained cold and calculating. "Well, isn't that interesting?" she mused. "Though I can't say I'm surprised. These things have a way of working themselves out in the end." Tom said nothing, his face an inscrutable mask. In that moment, I realized with sickening clarity that the test had never been about giving me a fair chance. To them, I was an inconvenient obstacle to be disposed of, no matter what the results showed. Memories came flooding back of those early days with Tom, when we discussed having children of our own. I remembered the tenderness in his eyes, the excitement in his voice as he painted pictures of our future family. Now, it was as if that man had never existed, replaced by this hollow stranger who valued his mother's whims above all else. As Lorraine droned on about needing to explore other options, I tuned her out, my mind racing. For weeks, I'd been reactionary, constantly scrambling to counter her latest move. But no more. It was time to take control of the situation, to turn the tables on these two manipulators before they could do any more damage. I would play along for now, I decided, lulling them into a false sense of complacency. And then, when they least expected it, I would strike, exposing their deceit and hypocrisy for all to see. This time, I would be the one dictating the terms. Lorraine's voice finally broke through my reverie. "Are you listening, Dolores? We need to start interviewing potential surrogates immediately." I met her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. "Of course, whatever you think is best." The words tasted like acid, but I forced myself to smile. Let them believe they'd won, for now. Soon enough, they would realize they had underestimated me at their peril. This was no longer just a fight for my marriage. It was a battle for my dignity, my self-worth. And I didn't intend to lose. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a sickening realization washed over me. This entire marriage had been a sham, a twisted game orchestrated by Lorraine, with Tom as her willing pawn. Memories came flooding back of our early days together, when we'd excitedly discussed our hopes and dreams for starting a family. I remembered Tom's tender reassurances that we had all the time in the world, that children would come when the moment was right. "We'll figure it out together, babe," he'd murmured, pulling me close. "No need to rush into anything." Now, in the harsh light of day, those words rang hollow. A carefully constructed lie designed to lure me into Lorraine's trap. Because the truth was, they'd never intended for me to be a permanent part of this family. The signs had been there all along, but I'd been too blinded by love and optimism to see them. Like the time Tom casually mentioned that his parents expected him to provide them with grandchildren, no matter what, or the way Lorraine had bristled at my reluctance to move into her home after our wedding. "It's just until we get on our feet," she'd said with a saccharine smile. "You don't mind a brief stint under my roof, do you, dear?" That brief stint had turned into years of walking on eggshells, enduring her endless critiques and power plays, all while Tom stood idly by, ceding more and more control to the woman who'd raised him. I should have run then, I realized, escaped before allowing myself to be slowly suffocated by their toxic dynamic. But some foolish part of me had clung to the belief that love could conquer all, that Tom would eventually grow a spine and stand up to his mother's manipulations. As I replayed our heated argument from earlier, any remaining doubts evaporated. Tom's callous admission that I was always meant to be a temporary solution, easily discarded once a more suitable option presented itself. It was a brutal awakening, exposing the true depths of his betrayal. White-hot anger surged through me, quickly followed by a wave of icy determination. If they thought I would simply slink away in disgrace, they had vastly underestimated me. I would stay and fight, unleashing a vengeance so exquisite, so utterly devastating, that they would have no choice but to rue the day they dared to cross me. Tom's meek compliance would be his undoing, the rope by which I hanged his pathetic dreams of legacy and inheritance. And Lorraine, that smug, domineering shrew, would find her world crumbling around her, victim to the same twisted machinations she'd so gleefully inflicted on me. A feral grin spread across my face as delicious scenarios began taking shape. This was no longer about salvaging some sliver of dignity. It was about complete and utter obliteration, leaving their selfish ambitions in ashes around them. Let them believe they'd won, I decided. Let them bask in their false sense of victory. Because soon enough, the tables would turn, and I would be the one dictating the terms of our little game. Closing my eyes, I could already envision their stunned, horrified expressions as the truth finally dawned. They wanted an heir to continue their precious legacy? Well, they were about to get far more than they bargained for. In the days that followed, Lorraine's campaign of emotional torture intensified. Everywhere I turned, she was there, chipping away at my self-worth with her snide remarks and undisguised looks of contempt. "Really, Dolores? You're going to wear that?" She'd eyeing my outfit with disdain. So frumpy. No wonder Tom's lost interest. I grit my teeth, determined not to rise to the bait. Losing my composure was exactly what she wanted. At first, Tom stayed out of it, content to let his mother do the heavy lifting when it came to demoralizing me. But soon enough, even he joined the fray, parroting Lorraine's insults about my inability to give him a child, my failure as a wife. "Maybe if you'd put in a bit more effort," he sneered one morning as I headed off to work, my sole refuge from the toxicity at home. Even there, I found no peace. Lorraine's constant demands that I contribute more financially to secure the family's future left me drained at the end of each day. I dutifully wrote a check for $1,000 every month, a sick feeling settling in my gut as I did. So this was my reward for years of loyal service, to be bled dry by the very people who claimed to care for me. The breaking point came when Lorraine announced, with fake sweetness, "The surrogates will be here this weekend for interviews. You'll want to be on your best behavior, Dolores." I could no longer hold my tongue. "Are you kidding me? After everything you've put me through, you expect me to just roll over for this?" Tom's eyes went wide, but Lorraine simply shrugged, unperturbed. "Well, I did give you a chance to do things the proper way, but you've made your choice clear." "My choice?" I sputtered, indignant rage bubbling up inside me. "When did I ever choose any of this? You two cowards dragged me into this nightmare against my will." In that moment, Tom should have spoken up, should have defended me as his wife. Instead, he shrank back, cowed by his mother's withering glare. "That's enough out of you," Lorraine said coolly. Why don't you run along like a good girl? The adults need to discuss family matters." The derisive dismissal was like a slap in the face. I opened my mouth, fully prepared to unleash the torrent of hurt and anger that had been building up for months. But something stopped me. Suddenly, it all became clear. This was what Lorraine wanted. She thrived on confrontation, on exerting her dominance over me through sheer force of will. Any outburst on my part would only serve to feed her power trip. A strange sense of calm washed over me, and I felt the fight go out of me, at least for the moment. Straightening my shoulders, I met Lorraine's gaze steadily. "You know what? You're right," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm just going to step aside and let you two continue making decisions for this family. Seems to be working out so well for you both." Lorraine blinked, clearly thrown by my uncharacteristic acquiescence. But her smugness quickly returned. "Finally, she sees reason. I knew you'd come around eventually, dear." I didn't bother responding, turning on my heel and heading for the door. Let them think they'd beaten me. Let them revel in their hollow victory. Because in that moment, I knew the game had changed. No more reacting, no more falling into their twisted manipulations. From now on, I would be the one dictating the terms, and by the time I was done, they wouldn't know what hit them. I should have seen it coming, really. The signs were all there. Lorraine's increasingly smug demeanor, Tom's guilty silences whenever I tried to discuss our future. But when I walked through the front door that fateful evening, the harsh reality still hit me like a ton of bricks. There, perched on the living room sofa like she owned the place, was a young woman I'd never seen before. Sleek and polished, with an air of self-assurance that could only come from years of being catered to. This was her, I realized with sickening clarity, the usurper they'd handpicked to take my place. "Ah, Dolores, there you are," Lorraine said, rising to greet me with a saccharine smile. "Allow me to introduce Angela. She'll be joining our family shortly." The smug emphasis on those last few words left no doubt as to Angela's intended role. I felt bile rise in my throat as Tom shifted awkwardly beside the interloper, unable to meet my gaze. "You've got to be kidding me," I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Tom, please tell me this is some kind of sick joke." For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or the last vestiges of the man I'd fallen in love with. But then Lorraine stepped between us, her expression hardening. "Don't be so dramatic, Dolores. You knew this day was coming." She gestured dismissively in my direction. "She's getting on in years, and her condition makes her unsuitable for carrying on the family name. Isn't that right, dear?" Tom said nothing, his silence hanging heavy in the air. Anger and hurt welled up inside me, quickly segueing into a cold, bitter sense of resignation. After everything, he still couldn't find the courage to stand up for me, for our marriage. "You're despicable, both of you," I spat, glaring at Lorraine and the smirking Angela in turn. "Using people's lives like this, discarding them when they no longer serve your purposes. I don't know what's worse, your cruelty or your cowardice." Lorraine merely shrugged, unperturbed. "Strong words from someone in your precarious position, but I suppose that's to be expected." With a sickening lurch, I realized she was holding something in her hands, a manila envelope, no doubt containing the final insult they had prepared for me. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked warily, but I already knew the answer. "Well, we can't very well have you lingering about once Angela arrives, now can we?" Lorraine replied, her smile taking on a predatory edge. "These are the divorce papers, which will allow you to exit this family with a modicum of dignity intact, though I shudder to think how you'll get by without us." The room started to spin as she extended the envelope toward me. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading, the point of no return, where I would have to decide whether to go down swinging or slink away in disgrace. Part of me wanted to fight, to rage against the injustice of it all. But another, wearier part knew that there was no point in prolonging this toxic charade any further. Lorraine and Tom had made their decision, callously prioritizing their twisted idea of legacy over anything resembling basic human decency. So with a heavy heart and a lump in my throat, I reached out and took the envelope, already feeling the weight of my shattered dreams pressing down on me. "Don't worry, I'll be just fine without you," I said, mustering what little dignity I had left. "In fact, I'd say the world just got a whole lot brighter." Lorraine's mocking laughter followed me out the door, but I didn't care. The papers were signed, the bridge burned, and as I drove away from that wretched house, I made a silent vow to myself. One day soon, they would regret ever underestimating me. For now, though, I needed to lick my wounds and chart a new course, one free from their toxic influence. But mark my words, vengeance would be mine. They wanted to cast me aside like some unwanted burden. Well, they were about to learn just how heavy that burden could become. In the aftermath of my brutal ousting from the family, I found myself adrift, reeling from the depths of Lorraine and Tom's betrayal, yet simultaneously liberated from their toxic grip. With nowhere else to turn, I did the only thing I could. I went home, back to the warm embrace of my parents and the life I'd left behind so many years ago. That son of a bitch! My father growled when I recounted the sordid tale, fists clenching with a rare burst of anger. After everything you sacrificed for that family. Mom simply held me close, her gentle shushing the only balm for the ragged wound in my heart. In their cozy little ranch home, surrounded by decades of cherished memories, I finally felt safe enough to process the devastating turn my life had taken. But even as I grieved my shattered dreams, a newfound sense of determination took root. I was done being a victim, done letting Lorraine and her cronies dictate my worth. It was time to show them and myself what I was truly capable of when freed from their toxic influence. The first step, I decided, was to rebuild my financial security. While Tom and his mother had been content to bleed me dry, I'd been quietly squirreling away funds, investing in a passion project that had become my own little secret. With my parents' support, I threw myself into making that dream a reality. Months passed in a whirlwind of hard work and renewed purpose. Before I knew it, the dilapidated flower shop I'd bought on a whim had been transformed into a thriving business, its rustic charm and premium blooms drawing rave reviews from customers across the city. My own little oasis far removed from the suffocating world of Lorraine's making. Which was why, when the local news crew showed up to do a feel-good segment on the shop's success, I didn't hesitate to seize the opportunity. "Behind every flower there's a story," I said earnestly into the camera, carefully manicured hands caressing a vibrant red rose. A tale of resilience, of blossoming against all odds. That's what this place represents to me. A chance to start anew, to cultivate something truly beautiful out of even the most barren of circumstances. The words rang with authenticity, each one carrying the weight of my own hard-won rebirth. And later, as the segment aired to thousands of viewers across the city, I couldn't help but savor the delicious twist of fate it represented. Because there, I knew Lorraine and Tom would be watching, their own circumstances drastically diminished in the wake of my departure. And as the camera panned over the bustling shop, showcasing my hard-earned success in high definition, they would be forced to confront the harsh truth they'd tried so desperately to deny. I was not the failure they'd sought to discard. I was a woman reborn, thriving precisely because I'd had the courage to shed the shackles they tried to bind me with. And with my newfound power and self-assurance, I had no intention of fading back into meek obscurity. No, this was just the opening salvo, the first taste of the reckoning that was to come. Lorraine and Tom wanted to cast me aside like garbage? Fine. They were about to learn just how hazardous their precious legacy could be when it fell into the wrong hands. The game was just beginning, and this time, I held all the cards. It was the annual neighborhood block party, and the air was thick with the scent of charred burgers and cheap beer. Normally, this was the kind of event I avoided like the plague, too much forced socializing, too many prying eyes. But this year was different. This year, I had a point to prove. As I made my way through the crowd, heads turned and whispers rippled in my wake. News of my very public split from Tom and his venomous mother had spread like wildfire, no doubt fueled by their own twisted version of events. But I didn't care. Let them talk. Soon enough, they would be singing a very different tune. "Well, well, if it isn't the woman of the hour," a familiar voice rang out, dripping with disdain. I turned to find Lorraine bearing down on me, Tom skulking a few paces behind like a beaten dog. Angela was mercifully absent, though I had no illusions about her eventual appearance. "Lorraine," I replied coolly, refusing to be baited. "Lovely to see you out and about. Keeping busy, I trust?" She sneered at my nonchalant tone. Don't play coy with me, Dolores. We both know you've been putting on quite the performance lately with your newfound... Sure, but you're going to be the one stuck with those 5 kids. I'm taking the house, Daniel said, his voice dripping with a smugness that sent shivers down my spine. His words were a slap in the face, a stark reminder of how far we had drifted from the love that once seemed unbreakable. I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking hands. You think this is just about the house, Daniel? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. What else is there, Laura? You'll crawl back eventually. You need me. That was Daniel, arrogant, dismissive, and utterly blind to the wreckage of our family that lay at his feet. Our journey together, which had begun with laughter and dreams in the corridors of college, had twisted into this bitter, unrecognizable end. You've always underestimated me, I said quietly, my mind made up. But not anymore. I'm filing for divorce, Daniel. And I'm taking the kids. His laughter was cruel, a sound that echoed in the empty spaces of our once happy home. Divorce? You think you can manage without me? Go ahead, try. But remember, I'm keeping the house, and without my money, good luck surviving. I looked into his eyes, searching for a trace of the man I had fallen in love with, but all I saw was a stranger, a cold, heartless stranger. I turned away, my heart heavy, but my decision firm. You'll see, Daniel. You'll see what life is like without us, and when you do, don't come looking for me. With those words, I left the room, leaving behind the shattered remains of what was once my life. The kids were still asleep, unaware of the storm that was about to change our lives forever. As I packed a few essentials, my mind raced with plans and possibilities. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for the 5 beautiful reasons sleeping in their rooms. They deserved a life free from the shadow of their father's indifference and cruelty. I glanced back one last time at the home that had held so many dreams and whispered a goodbye to a past that could never be reclaimed. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I felt a sense of freedom, tinged with fear and uncertainty. But above all, there was hope. A fragile, flickering hope that from the ashes of our broken family, something new and beautiful could arise. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. Ready to fight, ready to rebuild, and ready to show Daniel that his arrogance would be his downfall. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was the author of my own destiny. The day I met Daniel at college, he was the epitome of charm and wit. His laughter was infectious, and his promises were like a beacon of hope. We were young, in love, and naive enough to believe that love was all we needed. Fast forward to our married life, things started to change slowly yet painfully. The once attentive and caring Daniel became distant, his smiles replaced by frowns, and his warm embraces turned cold. It hit me hardest after the birth of our twins, Ellie and Ethan. I still remember holding them in my arms, their tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and looking up to see Daniel standing at the door, his expression unreadable. "Why won't you hold them?" I asked, my voice a mix of bewilderment and hope. "They are your children, Daniel." He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. I just don't know how to handle them." I tried to understand, to believe that it was just a phase, that soon he would be the doting father I had imagined he would be. But as days turned to months, the distance only grew. When I brought up the idea of having another child, hoping it might bridge the gap between us, his response was lukewarm. "Sure, if that's what you want." But it was never what he wanted, was it? The man who once dreamed of a big, happy family was now a shadow of his former self, buried under excuses and avoidance. Our life became a cycle of unmet expectations and silent dinners. The laughter and love that once filled our home were replaced by a deafening silence, broken only by the children's laughter, a sound that seemed to alienate Daniel even more. "Why don't you spend time with the kids?" I asked one evening, my voice a mere whisper, heavy with unshed tears. He didn't even look up from his phone. "I'm busy, Laura. You know how it is." But I didn't know. I didn't understand how the man I loved could turn his back on his own flesh and blood. How he could retreat into a shell, leaving me to juggle the responsibilities of 5 young lives alone. The more I tried to reach out, the more he pulled away, burying himself in work, and on the rare occasions he was home, he was like a ghost. Present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. As I lay in bed that night, the moon casting a pale light across the room, I realized the painful truth. The Daniel I fell in love with was gone, replaced by a stranger I no longer recognized, a stranger who wore the mask of my husband but whose eyes were void of the warmth and love that had once drawn me to him. I knew then that I had to make a choice, not just for myself, but for Ellie, Ethan, and the triplets. I had to step out of the shadow of a broken marriage and into the light of a new beginning. A beginning where I was strong, independent, and free from the chains of disappointment and unfulfilled promises. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, I made a silent vow. I would not let Daniel's indifference break me. I would rise from the ashes of our failed marriage and build a life of happiness and love for my children and myself. A life where we were no longer just surviving, but thriving. Living with Daniel had become like navigating a minefield, each step uncertain and fraught with the risk of emotional detonation. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, had become a prison of my frustrations and his indifference. "Mom, why doesn't Daddy play with us?" Ellie's innocent question one evening cut through me. I looked into her curious eyes, her twin brother Ethan nodding along, seeking an answer I didn't have. I knelt down, enveloping them in a hug, trying to shield them from the harsh reality. "Daddy's just very busy, sweethearts. But he loves you very much," I lied, my heart aching with the falsehood. The truth was Daniel had become a stranger not only to me, but to our children as well. His presence at home was like a passing shadow, cold and fleeting. The man who once dreamt of a bustling, joyful household now seemed burdened by the very existence of his own family. Our triplets, barely 2 years old, had quickly learned to rely solely on me. The lack of paternal affection had become their normal, and it pained me to see the void in their young lives. "Daniel, you need to spend time with your children. They hardly know you," I confronted him one night, the words spilling out in a mix of frustration and desperation. He scoffed, flipping through channels on the TV. "What's the point? They have you. Isn't that enough?" His dismissive tone stung, but it was the underlying implication that wounded me deeply. In his eyes, I was just the caretaker, a background fixture in the narrative of his life. The financial strain only added to the growing chasm between us. Daniel's salary was decent, but with his increasing detachment, he became more secretive about our finances. I remember stumbling upon a credit card bill, hidden beneath a pile of papers. The numbers danced before my eyes, countless transactions, none of which were for the family. It was as if Daniel was living a separate life, one where we didn't exist. "Daniel, we need to talk about our finances. The kids' expenses are mounting, and we can't keep up like this," I said one evening, mustering all the courage I had. He barely glanced at me, his eyes glued to his phone. "Why? You managing fine, aren't you? Just cut back on whatever you're wasting money on." His words were like a slap in the face. Wasting money? On what? The children's needs? Food? The basic necessities of life? The more I tried to bridge the gap, the more he retreated into his shell, leaving me alone to bear the weight of our crumbling world. The loneliness was crushing, but it was the helplessness that consumed me. The feeling of being trapped in a loveless marriage, fighting a losing battle for the sake of my children. But amidst the despair, a fire was kindling within me, a fire of defiance, a determination to no longer be a silent sufferer in the narrative Daniel had written for us. I was ready to rewrite our story, one where the children and I were not just mere characters in the background, but the protagonists of our own lives. And as I tucked my children into bed that night, whispering stories of love and hope, I knew the time had come. The time to step out of the shadows and into the light. The time to reclaim our lives from the clutches of a man who had forgotten the meaning of family. The day I decided to break free from Daniel's grasp, I felt a mix of fear and liberation. The morning air was crisp, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere within our home. As I prepared breakfast, Daniel sauntered into the kitchen, his demeanor as cold as ever. "What's this?" he sneered, looking at the simple meal I had put together. "It's breakfast," I replied, my voice calm but firm. He scoffed, pushing the plate away. "This is what I get after working all day? You can't even cook a decent meal?" I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to retaliate. For years, I had tolerated his belittling remarks, his disregard for our family. But not anymore. Daniel, the kids need new clothes, and the school fees are due. We need to discuss our finances, I ventured, hoping for a rational conversation. He rolled his eyes, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. Your job is to take care of the house and the kids. I do my part. Don't expect more. That was the moment I realized nothing would ever change. Daniel would never see us as his priority. His family was just a burden, an inconvenience in his self-centered world. Later that day, as I watched the children play, their laughter a bittersweet sound, I knew I had to take a stand. For them, for me. Daniel, we need to talk. This can't go on, I said when he finally returned home that evening. He looked at me, a sneer forming on his lips. What now, Laura? Tired of your comfortable life? His words ignited something within me. Comfortable? You call this comfortable? Your children barely know you, and you think throwing money at us is enough? He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Oh, please, you've had it easy. Don't start playing the victim now. His lack of empathy, his sheer arrogance was staggering. It's not about being a victim, Daniel. It's about our family. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? For a moment, he looked taken aback, as if the idea of anyone challenging him was unthinkable. You think you can manage without me? Go ahead, try, he challenged, his voice laced with contempt. I looked him in the eye, my resolve strengthening. I can, and I will. I'm filing for divorce, Daniel. I refuse to let you drag me and the children down any longer. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by his usual arrogance. Divorce? Fine. But remember, I'm keeping the house, and good luck with the kids on your own. As he walked away, a sense of determination washed over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to fight for a better future, for a life where my children and I were more than just afterthoughts in someone else's story. I tucked the children into bed that night, their innocent faces a reminder of the battle ahead. But I was ready to break free from the chains of a loveless marriage and start anew, ready to show Daniel that his neglect and cruelty would be his undoing. The day I started the divorce proceedings, I felt a mix of trepidation and resolve. As I sat in the lawyer's office, outlining the years of neglect and emotional abandonment, the weight of my decision sank in. Mrs. Williams, we'll ensure you get what you deserve in this settlement. Your children's well-being is our priority, the lawyer assured me. I nodded, feeling a sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. When I informed Daniel about the divorce, his reaction was predictably dismissive. Divorce? You think you can handle everything on your own? This will be amusing. His words no longer hurt me. Instead, they fueled my determination to build a better future for myself and my children. As the legal battle ensued, Daniel's true colors became even more apparent. He was more concerned about his finances and the house than the emotional trauma he had inflicted on our family. You're trying to rob me of everything, Laura. That house is mine. I worked for it, he shouted during one of our mediated sessions. I looked at him, my resolve unwavering. This isn't about the house, Daniel. It's about our children, their future. But you wouldn't understand that. The legal process was draining, both emotionally and financially. But with each passing day, my resolve strengthened. I was fighting for justice, for recognition of the years I had spent in the shadow of a man who valued his ego more than his family. During the final hearing, Daniel's arrogance was on full display. You think you've won, Laura? You'll come crawling back. You can't survive without me. But he was wrong. I had survived, and I would continue to do so. The court's judgment was in my favor, granting me custody of the children and a fair settlement. As I walked out of the courtroom, a sense of liberation washed over me. I had stood up to the man who had tried to diminish my worth, and I had emerged victorious. That evening, as I sat with my children, their laughter filling our modest but warm home, I knew I had made the right decision. We were starting a new chapter, one of hope and new beginnings. Daniel's attempts to intimidate me had failed. He had underestimated my strength, my resilience. And now, he was the one left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. I looked at my children, their faces beaming with happiness, and I knew we would be okay. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. The path to liberation had been long and fraught with challenges, but I had walked it with my head held high. And as I put my children to bed that night, I whispered a promise to them and to myself. We would never be victims of Daniel's cruelty again. We were free, and we would thrive. The days following the divorce were a blend of relief and rebuilding. My sister Emily became my rock during this tumultuous time. Moving in with her was a decision born out of necessity, but it blossomed into a period of healing and growth for me and the children. "Laura, you're stronger than you realize," Emily said one evening as we sat in her cozy living room, the kids asleep in the next room. Her words were a balm to my weary soul. "I had to be for the kids," I replied, my voice tinged with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. The practical aspects of starting over were daunting. The financial settlement from the divorce was a relief, but it was the emotional scars that were harder to heal. Emily's support was invaluable. She was more than just a sister. She was a mentor, a friend. Daniel's absence became more pronounced in the kids' lives, but we filled the void with love and laughter. Emily's bond with the children grew each day, her natural maternal instinct a comfort to their wounded hearts. I found a job at a local library, a place that offered not just employment, but a sanctuary of sorts. The routine, the sense of purpose, was therapeutic. Slowly, I was reclaiming my identity, no longer just Daniel's wife or the mother of his children, but Laura, strong, independent, and resilient. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Daniel's shadow loomed over our lives in unexpected ways. He tried to worm his way back into our lives, his messages oscillating between apologies and accusations. "You'll regret this, Laura. You and the kids need me," he texted one night, his words a stark reminder of the manipulation I had escaped. I didn't respond. Emily's advice echoed in my mind. "Don't let him back in, Laura. You've come too far." Her words were my anchor, keeping me steady in the face of Daniel's persistent attempts to unsettle me. The children adjusted to our new life with remarkable resilience. Their laughter filled Emily's home, turning it into a haven of hope and new beginnings. We had our moments of struggle, of course, but we faced them together as a family. As the weeks turned into months, I realized the divorce had not just been the end of a painful chapter, but the start of a new narrative. A narrative where I was the author, where my children and I were the main characters, charting a course towards a future filled with possibility. Emily and I would often sit on her porch after the kids were asleep, talking about life, dreams, and the future. In those quiet moments, I found a peace I hadn't known in years. "You've done it, Laura," Emily would say, her eyes shining with pride. "You've built a new life for yourself and the kids." And she was right. Against all odds, we had built something beautiful from the ashes of my broken marriage. We were no longer just surviving, we were thriving. Months had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. However, the peace was abruptly shattered one evening by an unexpected call from Daniel. I hesitated as I saw his name flash on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for what was to come. "What do you want, Daniel?" His voice was a mix of desperation and arrogance. "Laura, you need to come back. The kids need a father." I couldn't help but scoff. "They have been doing just fine without you." "You're turning them against me," he accused, his voice rising in anger. "No, Daniel, you did that all by yourself," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I've changed, Laura. I realize my mistakes now. Let's start over," he pleaded, but his words rang hollow. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "Start over? After everything you've done? You're delusional, Daniel." There was a pause on the line, and when he spoke again, his tone had changed. "You'll regret this, Laura. You can't keep me away from my kids forever." I clenched my phone, feeling a mix of anger and determination. "Watch me, Daniel. I will do whatever it takes to protect them from you." The call ended with a click, leaving me shaken but resolute. I knew Daniel's threats were not to be taken lightly, but I was no longer the woman who had tolerated his neglect and abuse. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's attempts to worm his way back into our lives intensified. He tried to sway the children with gifts, to charm Emily with false apologies, but we stood firm. Then came the day when I received a letter from Daniel's lawyer, demanding visitation rights. It was a move I had anticipated, yet it filled me with dread. I met with my lawyer, my resolve unwavering. I won't let him near the kids. He's a toxic influence. "We'll fight this, Laura. my lawyer assured me. You have a strong case. The ensuing legal battle was draining, but I was fighting for something far more important than my own well-being. I was fighting for my children's future. As I sat in the courtroom listening to Daniel's lawyer paint him as a reformed man, a devoted father, I felt a surge of anger. He was playing the victim, twisting the narrative to suit his agenda. But the evidence was on my side. The years of neglect, the emotional trauma he had inflicted, spoke louder than his empty words. The judge's verdict was a vindication of all we had endured. Daniel's request for visitation was denied, with the judge citing concerns for the children's emotional well-being. As I walked out of the courtroom, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had stood up to Daniel not just for myself, but for my children. I had shown them the strength of standing up to injustice, to fight for what is right. We were free from Daniel's shadow, finally. The road ahead would have its challenges, but we were ready to face them together. As I tucked the kids into bed that night, I knew we had turned a page. We were no longer bound by the chains of the past. We were moving forward, towards a future filled with hope and promise. And as I turned off the lights, a sense of peace settled over me. We were safe, we were together, and we were home.